rabbit hole. It kind of takes me down the rabbit hole when I think about it personally, because my personal experience is such that I'm still taking showers twice a week. I do wash-ups in the tub for the rest of the week just to keep up with my personal hygiene, because that's how I was raised by my mom. But I mean, really what it does, how it weighs on your psyche, to be honest with you, just to cope with it, along with everything else, with the pandemic and all of the other problems going on in our communities, with this thing kind of in the back burner, it could be pretty heavy on your heart. But today's event is not about me personally. It's about the residents of the state of Michigan, and giving you an update on what is still going on around the state. There are a variety of things that the panelists will be discussing tonight, including water shutoffs, updates on PFAS, the contaminated water over there with our partners in Benton Harbor, how the governor has actually funneled some money over there to them. Also, how emergency management plays a huge role, almost like I would really venture to say a gargantuan role in many of the problems faced in these marginalized communities in which I personally live. I'm just grateful that, I mean, this could be some really physically taxing and mentally and emotionally draining work, but when you're in the company of these types of people, that's a beautiful thing about humanity, I think. Being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with what we call now water warriors is just really, it's just, in a sense, it's a blessing, because I get to do this work with some magnificent people, but at the same time, it can be really a Debbie Downer. I mean, just the weight of going to still having to deal with bottled water and recycling and all that goes along with that. I have an elderly aunt who, to this day, I've been taking her water, I would say every 3 to 4 weeks for the past 4 years. Will be 70 years old, which she is grateful for. But the fact that I have to still go and get water for her is just really shameful when I think about that. But moving forward with the program and not taking up too much more of the time, our first panelist is just a dynamic woman. We call her affectionately Mama Claire Mcclendon, but her name is Miss Claire Mcclendon. And just to give you some background about her, she is from the Democracy Defense League. She's been on the ground fighting for many years, going as far back as when the emergency manager law was first being implemented. Mama Claire is no joke. But once we started to find out about the ensuing water crisis that would take over our town, she pivoted and began to partner and become a major voice in our community in getting the word out. She's here tonight to give us an update on what's been going on here with Flint and the continuation of the water crisis. And without further ado, I present to many of you, Miss Claire Mcclendon.
Well, thank you all for having me again this year. A lot of things have happened since we met last year, but our goals and our quest for restorative justice, environmental justice continues. And I just want to say that our hearts are heavy upon hearing the situation in Benton Harbor. And it's like that movie Groundhog Day. And as a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to go to Benton Harbor last Saturday when they had a town hall meeting. And when I pulled up and saw the water lines and putting water in the cars, I thought maybe I had made a wrong turn. I thought I was back in Flint. And so the struggle continues, but the good news is that Flint is despite the fact that we've had our trials and tribulations, we have a lot of lessons that we can share with other communities. And so that we're thankful that we can be not only of assistance to Benton Harbor, but other cities in sharing our experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly in our quest. Now, right now, we in Flint still are pursuing clean water. Our water is still not as it should be. And even though we don't want to say that nothing has changed, because we did score some victories in the struggle from Flint, because we were able to put water on the table as a social justice issue for cities and towns around the country, and bring attention to the situation about this country's infrastructure and the lead problem that for too long has been ignored. So for that, we claim victory on that, because now folks all over the country are looking at their water and seeing, is my water safe? So we call that a victory. And even though we had high levels of double-digit levels of lead in the water here in Flint, that the community had to fight to even get the attention. The water has improved, but it's not where it should be. It's not potable, meaning it's not tap ready. So we're still fighting along those lines. And I just wanted to share just a little bit about what we've learned in Flint. We have learned that water is a precious commodity, or is becoming a commodity. Water was for the most part considered a public asset. The emergency managers that some of you know about on this call, these we call them dictators, that were dispatched to various cities throughout Michigan. And there's 3 important features of a city that received an emergency manager. And this is important for us to know, because when we say we don't want this to happen again, we do have to understand how we got here. And the 3 features that compelled the governor to send these dictators in chief, also known as emergency managers, into the cities was, 1, that they were majority minority. That was one feature. So all the cities that were taken over had majority minority cities. Even though Michigan is 13% African American statewide, over 50% of African Americans in the state of Michigan lived at one time or another under emergency management. The second feature is that the community that was taken over had double digits of poverty. Poverty was like a magnet for the governor to ship these dictators into these towns and cities. The third feature that drew emergency managers to it, and this is very important, is assets. The city had assets. So even though these cities were income poor, they had assets. So you were property rich, but income poor. And one of the goals of the emergency manager was to come in to these communities and steal the assets. And water is the #1 asset for a city. Water is becoming the new oil. We've all heard that. And so we got to understand what brought us here. We got to understand that now in Flint, not only are we living with toxic water, but we're living with among the highest water bills in the nation, even though we're one of the poorest cities in the nation. For every dollar a resident spends on their water bill, out of that dollar, 60 cents goes to the bond market, to the bond holders. Those who are the bond holders? The bond holders were the ones who came in with the bright idea of a new pipeline. And in the process, we were switched to Flint, and the rest is history. So we got to keep both of those things in mind in order for us to win our fight. We've got to understand that today we are living in an age of new technology, computerization, the decimation of manual labor as we've known it, and that the corporate interests and special interests are shifting their agendas to public assets in order to make up for this market that they're losing by getting rid of jobs. I know that was kind of convoluted, but these are some things that we have to understand, because when we say we're not going to go back and return to the old ways of doing things, we have to learn these lessons, and we have to understand who benefits from these crises. And then I'll just close with this. Right now, residents in this city are embarking on a petition drive. As a matter of fact, we just finished up a petition drive, and we have 2 ordinances that we're demanding that the city council pass. Keep in mind, the Biden administration has sent a rescue packages to cities all over this country. Detroit, Flint, Benton Harbor, all these cities have been afforded millions and millions of dollars as a COVID rescue plan. And our thing is, we're going to use or allow the opportunity for this rescue plan to right the wrongs that has been done to our residents as it relates to water. So what we're saying is, we want a water affordability plan, that your water bill be based on your ability to pay, and that we want a suspension on water shutoffs, a permanent suspension. If you could do it during COVID, you can do it now. It is time for us to right the wrongs of injustice that been perpetrated upon us for years. And so I'll close with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Claire, for that history and for helping us to understand what has happened in Flint and what is currently happening, and how we can help to support you all. So I've added a link in the chat if you want to learn more about the petition. There's a link to where you can learn more. And moving on, I just want to say, as Angie indicated in the welcoming, we are all impacted by water insecurity across the state of Michigan. And with that, I want to introduce Tony Spinola. Tony Spinola is a Detroit area attorney and Oscoda, Michigan homeowner who became a leading national PFAS advocate after learning that his home in Oscoda is located in the zone of concern for PFAS contamination from the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base. Tony is a co-founder of Need Our Water, also known as NOW, a community action group in Oscoda, and is the co-chair of the newly formed Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. He also serves on the leadership team of the National PFAS Contamination Coalition, comprised of PFAS impacted community groups across the nation. So with that, I will give the floor over to Tony.
Thank you, Tiana, and thank you, Mama Claire, for your moving testimonial. It is really an honor to be here among some of the great water warriors in our state. And I think that it's really, I think Angie said it in the beginning, that we all on this platform tonight know what it's like to not be able to drink water, to not have it. And it's an unbelievable, just like mind-boggling in the 21st century in the United States of America, that we have these issues everywhere. And I would dare say that in places where we don't think it, we think it's a problem, it probably is. And PFAS is a classic example of all of that. And so I'm here because I really want to share with you a little bit about my Northern Michigan community of Oscoda, and to talk to you about the commonalities that we have, which you might not be aware of. Talk about our situation, and talk about how important it is that we all work together and that we knock down barriers that are geographic, socioeconomic, and otherwise, because we have so much in common here, and the issues and the stakes are so incredibly high. So my community of Oscoda was the first PFAS contaminated site in the state of Michigan. We learned of this in 2010, more than almost 12 years ago now. In the interim 12 years that have ensued, we have been operating now under 5 separate public health warnings. We can't drink our water. We can't eat fish from a 9-mile stretch of the Osable River. We can't eat venison harvested from deer within a 3.5-mile radius of the former Air Force Base. We can't eat any wild game from a marsh area near the former base. And we have foam along our shorelines and waterways that is so contaminated that we can't even touch it. This impacts our lives in so many ways. And when you think about what's it like to have a day without water, as a kid, that would sound like a science fiction movie. And sadly, it's a reality in our lives, that in a community that is where there is water everywhere, inland lake, river, Lake Huron, so much of it we can not only not use, we have to stay away from. And as we look at the issues that impact our community, I think it's really important to understand, again, the commonalities. We are a poor community. We have people who rely not just on the water from their own wells in our community to drink from, many of which are contaminated and unsafe, but also who rely on the fish from the river and the deer and the wildlife that are unsafe to eat. And so when the state comes along and says, oh, don't eat any fish, and we say to them, well, that's not good enough, because many people don't have the choice not to eat the fish. Or when they say don't eat the deer or don't eat the wildlife, and they put some signs up and they say, oh, no big deal. Now we have signs up. No, big deal. It's still a big deal. And then they come to us, and this community that really is living on a shoestring can't drink the water. And the local community has had to raise money on its own to try to extend municipal water lines that would provide more safe drinking water. There are 10 phases that are needed in order to complete the project. we are on phase 3, and at the rate we're going, it will be another 7 to 10 years before we finish all of them. And in the last phase, again, the state says, well, now you don't need to worry, you've got access to clean water. Well, there's just a big problem with that. And I think a whole bunch of you here can relate to it. You have to pay to have the water, the water line from your house extended out to the new mains. Well, that costs anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. Not a lot of people can afford to do that. And then on top of that, you've got water bills that people can't afford to pay. So what happens? We have people drinking contaminated water, water that's unsafe to drink and to bathe and to shower in, and all the other things that you use water for in your life. And when I received my letter in 2016 saying, don't drink your water, and then they can't come in and they give us a filter for our kitchen sink. Well, you don't just use water from your kitchen sink, as my friends here on the platform know. You bathe in it, you brush your teeth, you use it in so many different ways. And then you have plants that you may try to grow in your yard, vegetables, can you eat those? So many ways that we're impacted. And because we're so small, we have roughly 5,000 or 6,000 people, because we don't have a lot of money, we don't have any media outlets in our area, it's really tough for us. And it's even tougher because we are dealing with the federal government as the polluter. It's the United States Air Force in our case. And as I heard Mama Claire talk about the emergency manager, and what a terrible, terrible injustice in that whole system, it reminds me of what happens in my community. All of the decisions that are made regarding the contamination that's caused by the Air Force base are made by the Air Force. They're all done in secret. We are not even allowed to sit in and listen to the discussions that they have, let alone to engage and participate in them. And so we are at the mercy of bureaucrats. In our case, they're based in Texas, who fly in and fly out and leave us with this giant mess that we have to contend with. One of the things that I again want to share with you in terms of our common interest here is that as a part of my community, one of the areas of serious contamination is on a lake, the lake that my family owns a home on. It's called Van Etten Lake. And that it's a youth camp. It's owned by the YMCA of Metropolitan Detroit. And it's a place where kids from the inner city, people of color from Detroit, Flint, can come to enjoy the beauty of northern Michigan. It sits atop a PFAS contaminant plume that comes out right at the beach where those kids swim. And the foam piles up, that foam that I talked about earlier piles up there. And the camp does its best to keep the kids away from it. But I look at that and I say, environmental justice, come on, folks, clean it up. Clean it up. What are you doing? It's been 12 years. Nothing has taken place to even begin to address it. And it's important that our friends in Flint, Detroit, Benton Harbor, my heart goes out to you, because I know what it feels like to be told you can't drink your water. It's terrible. And when I hear it happening over and over and over and over, Mama Claire talked about the importance of understanding history. Well, history just keeps repeating itself. We got to put a stop to that. And I think the only way that we can do that is to come together as a unified group to say, we're not going to take this anymore. You may have money, you may have power, but we have the vote. And in the end, that's who decides who's going to be making these decisions. I have to jump off this call, and I really, really regret that I have to do that, to speak to a group in Traverse City in a few minutes about PFAS contamination there. And you're going to hear a theme. I'm going to tell you just a little about it, and I'll finish up with Oscoda. But in that community, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy found out that there was a potential PFAS contamination problem from the airport there. And they identified homes, 18 of them, that were potentially impacted by potential contamination. So what did they do? They contacted the airport, they contacted the Coast Guard. They didn't contact the homeowners. And they waited 8 months before they bothered to tell those people that they were potentially drinking contaminated water. And it turned out that they were. And when the residents in that neighborhood found out that the state had known for all that time, they were outraged. And so we're in the midst right now of fighting a battle to try to get the state to agree to notify people when they're investigating potential contamination, to notify them when the investigation begins, not long after the fact when people are continuing to be exposed. So I think that we have a lot in common with Benton Harbor, of course, with Flint and Detroit as well. And what I would ask, we have just formed a new network called the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. It's designed to bring communities that are impacted by PFAS together, but I think we need to go even further, and we need to talk about all water issues, and we need to unite. With regard to Oscoda, and I know that you want to know how you can help us. You can help us by continuing the fight for water affordability, joining with us, and Monica Lewis Patrick and I have talked about this on many platforms many times together, but we've got to continue that fight for affordability. And again, the fight to have that YMCA camp in our community addressed and addressed promptly. So those are just some of the issues. We could talk about the history of Oscoda because it's 12 years and it happened during the Flint water crisis. And it was the very same people who held information from us. It was while it was going on in Flint. So I just want to say this. I'm here to work with everybody here to break down those barriers and to make sure that no more Benton Harbors, no more Flints, no more Oscodas happen. We got to fight on our hands, and we need to support our friends in Benton Harbor right now in their time of dire need. I just also saw in the newspaper that there is a lead problem in Hamtramck right here in Southeast Michigan. So lots of work ahead, but I hope that we can all work together and come together in unity to bring these water issues not only to the fore, but to a conclusion so that our children and grandchildren don't continue to have to live under this yoke of unfairness, really that is being presided over by our government. I thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. And again, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. I do, before you leave, want to ask, is there any place that we can go online to find more information or to show our support? If there is, if you could put it in the chat, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I will try to grab a link and put it in the chat before I have to sign off here.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, thank you, Tony. That was a very informative talk that you provided. And for me, it helped to kind of link together how water insecurity impacts everyone across the state of Michigan, and that we, as you said, all need to work together in order to continue the fight. Coming up next, I am excited. This is something that is near to we the people of Detroit's heart. We want to give our youth an opportunity to discuss their involvement in understanding water insecurity and what they've been up to in order to help us to combat water insecurity across the state and in the city of Detroit. So every year, We the People of Detroit has a summer intern program for our youth. And this year, the program was a success, even as we navigated through challenges having to deal with COVID-19 and how we communicated some of the program. The program is normally in person, but this year we did some portions of the program online, and everybody was still very engaged, and it was a success. The young people were enthusiastic and took pride in canvassing the community to help Detroit residents understand the safety of their water. We were able to collaborate with youth across the state and the Great Lakes region, utilizing the Flint Development Center for water testing and to provide access to scientific equipment and methodology for our young people. With that said, I would like to introduce one of our youth who participated in the internship with her mother, who is also a member of the We the People of Detroit team, to give some insight on the experience and to share some of her art that she's created. I am going to share my screen. Yeah. So introducing Brooke Bowers. She's a musician, athlete, and artist. Brooke Bowers is a native Detroiter and avid anime enthusiast. She's a current 7th grader and aspiring biomedical engineer. Brooke has been making art since she was about 2. Her earliest artistic works include finger paintings and cartoon characters. Her passion for community and environmental justice shines through her work. Brooke is a 2021 We the Youth of Detroit intern. Joining her will be Norel Hemphill, Detroiter by way of Flint, Michigan. Norel Hemphill is focused on helping to create policy and legislation that drives water affordability. Norel is a recent law school graduate pursuing her passion for environmental justice. She has the pleasure of contributing language to the water affordability portion of the proposed Detroit City Charter. Presently, she's studying for the Michigan Bar and working as a legal intern at We the People of Detroit. With that, take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, Tiana. I'll just give a slight intro and then I'll turn it over to Brooke, because one of the key points of this summer internship is that it really was youth driven. The youth were out there every day collecting the water samples. So I guess let me back up a little bit, I'm sorry. So with the project, they were doing testing lead in the water in some key neighborhoods in Detroit that were identified by the lead lines, the amount of children in the area. And with that, we went around to 50. We went around to those 3 neighborhoods and collected samples from 50 homes. I was just there supporting the children, making sure they were safe while they were canvassing, helping them if they got into any hard spots. But like I said, it was very, very much so their program. I'll let Brooke now tell a little bit about what she did and her experience with it.
Hello, my name is Brooke. I'm in 7th grade and I go to Flint Academy. And I was with We the Youth of Detroit's summer internship, and it was actually a really fun experience for me. Prior to this, I didn't even know about this situation going on, but it was just like a whole new opening. Like, no one was even talking about it. There was one thing in about kindergarten or 1st grade, we had a thing called Dad's Club, and they just helped around at the school. But we were bringing water to Flint. They didn't give us any context. They just said that they needed water. And the class that brought in the most water got a pizza party. But they didn't say anything about what was happening, just that their water was bad. No one really thought anything of it. They thought, I really didn't even care that much. I was just thinking about the pizza party. I was in 1st or kindergarten, but the most important thing at the time was the pizza party, not the context behind it. When people were dying, no one had water to make formulas for their babies, to bathe themselves, to clean. And that was a big problem, but no one was talking about it because they were being suppressed. But Tell me about the summer program. What did you do this summer? So this summer we learned about what was happening. We did water sampling. We learned that, which was really cool. But it was kind of difficult at first, but I got used to it. We went up to houses. So in the first few weeks of going out and getting samples and asking people if they want to get their water tested, we went door knocking and asked if they wanted their water tested, lead in water. And it was like kind of difficult. I hadn't like really left the house and gotten that human interaction in a little while, but it was difficult at first. But when I did more, it felt pretty natural. Then there were some people that were very resistant to it, like older people who have been living in the neighborhood for like years. They've been saying things like, my water is just fine. I've been living here for years. But the people that are most at risk are people that have been living there for years, because the lead was easily like able to make pipes. And so a lot of the houses like in the 1960s and up, like back in that era, were made out of that because it was really easy to make. And
tell me about your art.
Okay. I made this art for
It's Our Water.
It's Our Water campaign, and one of my friends, she actually like helped me get the design for the main water person.
When you
Because-
finished the internship?
Yes, we needed a water warrior. So I didn't want it to be like just a normal human. I wanted it to be someone cool. And we thought of an actual water person. That was really cool.
Where did you get the color? Why did you decide to choose these colors?
I didn't choose them.
The red and
The blue.
silver.
The blue was just for the water. The red in contrast to like a darker background stands out a lot. And we were doing a really powerful message, so I had to give some context that really stood out.
What about the hands at the top?
The hands at the top are white people that are getting the water that's fresh and clean. And there's a little tape and it says Black people's water. People of color's water down there. We can't get, because they can't get equal water.
And what does the little bubble say?
I cannot read that.
You forgot. Can I cross the tape? I need water for my baby.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, did I stop sharing? Thank you, Brooke and Narelle.
So that was for
Um,
the It's Our Water pledge that she created that art for. And of course, you can go to wethepeople.com, wethepeopleofdetroit.com, and take the water pledge for the It's Our Water campaign to stay up to date on everything that's happening. But like I said, it was just an honor to be a part. It really helped the youth out with their summer internship.
Thank you, Brooke and Narelle. Brooke, your art is amazing. I'm always inspired when I see your drawings. So thank you so much for sharing with us and for being so expressive through your art. Let me bring my screen back up. Next, we would like to introduce Reverend Pinckney. Reverend Pinckney of Benton Harbor, Michigan is a longtime community organizer who has led resistance in this predominantly African-American community to the local and state government. He has and continues to petition government officials and lawmakers for basic human rights in the city of Benton Harbor and across the state of Michigan. Hi, Reverend Pinckney, we are ecstatic to have you.
No, I'm excited to be here. I must confess, it's been a long, long day. We have been providing bottled water, going door to door to make sure that every resident in the city of Benton Harbor have clean drinking water. But let the truth be told. The struggle that have taken place in recent years in Benton Harbor is a case in point, one that holds a number of lessons for the American people. The fight in Benton Harbor is a war. It's no conflict. This is the real deal. Is whether Americans would have clean and safe water. You talked about a day without water. How about 2.5 days in the city of Benton Harbor without water? 2.5 days. They're making a mockery of the citizens of Benton Harbor. But we have a major problem here, and I'm going to give you the foundation how all this came about, which I think is very, very important. My good friend Emma Kennard, some of y'all know Emma Kennard. She's my good friend, and her daughter came here from Texas, and during the process, she wanted to take a bath. And when she attempted to take a bath, she saw that the bath water was gold and had little particles in it. And so she asked her mother, what is wrong with the water here in Benton Harbor? Emma said that the water has been like this for over 6 to 7 months. And she told her mom, have you been actually bathing in this water? And she said, yeah, older, she's 70-something years old. So she didn't really, reason unknown. She didn't do anything. When they called me, the daughter called me and said, did you know my mom was bathing in this type of water? I said, what type? I know the water was bad here, but she said, yeah. I said, well, get you 2 jugs and take it and give it to the mayor of Benton Harbor so he can have it tested for you so we can determine how bad the water was. She took 2 jugs to him. He refused to even look at it. I mean, she was so hurt. She called me from the chambers. She said he wouldn't look at it. I said, well, bring it to me. I'm going to send it to the University of Michigan biological lab and have it tested. And by doing so, it came back with well over 300 parts per billion of lead. That's when the Benton Harbor Community Water Council actually went to work. We started testing other people's water in the community. It was almost ridiculous what we found. The city of Benton Harbor has never had 60 samples of water that had been tested, but they never was given a violation by EGLE, the DEQ at that time. So the supervisor of the plant asked me to help them get 60 samples. I told them I would. They didn't offer us any money. They didn't offer us nothing. They just said, would you help us? And we said, yes. We went out and got 63 samples of the water in the city of Benton Harbor. It came back with 22 parts per billion of lead on an average in the water. So we were thinking, along with the supervisor, who was telling them that the water had exceeded the 15 parts per billion action level, that something needed to be done. But the mayor of Benton Harbor, Marcus Muhammad, and the city manager, they had a press conference telling the people that the water was good to drink. even at 22 parts per billion. And that really got us excited because it upset so many people. Then we went out and the next year went out and got 60, 64, 65 samples again. This time it came back 24 parts per billion. And yet it's still, the supervisor reported it to them. And what they did to him, they fired him. The DEQ or Eagle, whichever one you want to call them, they fired him because he was complaining that the lead was too high to be in the water. They need to do something. And they did not tell the residents of Benton Harbor that the water was filled with lead. The third year, the new guy came in, Rod Jones, or Robert Jones, whatever you may want to call. I know him as Rod. He's from Flint. He used to work there. And what he did, we went out and got 64 samples, and it was at 33 parts per billion. And what he did, which I'm guilty because I didn't know, he wanted me to get 14 more from Good Homes to lower it down to 24 parts per billion. And when we discovered that it was 33, we were all angry and upset. And then what happened, we were waiting for them to do something. They had no intention of rectifying this. No intention, none. So me, the Water Council, myself, we sat down and we knew that we had to do something. And what we did, we was going back and forth on what needed to be done. I said that we can file a petition with the EPA, and that would shake them up more than anything else, because our goal was to file a class action lawsuit right after that. But we got together with some of the with 5 petitioners. We got Sylvia, Elin, Nicholas. It's 5. I can't think of all the names right now, but it was 5 of us who sat down and said, well, let's do it. I said, well, let me take it back to the council and let them make the decision, because it's crucial that they be a part of this. So when we took it back, they voted unanimously to file the petition. On September the 9th, we filed the petition and all hell broke loose. The governor got wind of it, that we was filing it. We don't know who leaked it or whatever. I really don't care. We don't care who leaked it. We care less about that. The main thing was that we got some action. Somebody leaked to the governor that we was filing on September the 9th. On September the 8th, she said that she was going to provide $20 million to Benton Harbor for the lead and pipes. And at that time, I think she said 5 years. We actually said 5 years ourselves because they were saying 20 years here in the city of Benton Harbor, which made no sense to me because Benton Harbor is only 4 miles by 4 miles. So here's what happened. Once she made that announcement, she almost got the upper hand on us because someone leaked that to her that we was doing it. So she immediately came out swinging, but she didn't know what else we wanted. We was demanding bottled waters, which we know is just a bandage on the bullet hole. And we were saying that if we use the filters, that we needed to have a study first to make sure that they can handle the amount of lead that was in the water. So those are some of the talking points that she used. She got a little bit ahead of the game and allowed this to happen. But now we're flooded with bottled water. But here's the problem with the bottled water situation. And some of you may not see a problem with this, but I do. She's pumping 30,000 bottled water into the city of Benton Harbor. But the problem is 25,000 is going to the surrounding area. Even white, middle class, upper class St. Joseph, Michigan, is coming and standing in line to get bottled water. Unheard of. Sodas, St. Joe Township, Benton Township, all these people are standing in line, getting water. The line be 4 or 5 blocks long. It's twisted all the way around. Everybody is trying to get water, but they smarter than, I would say, maybe some of the Benton Harbor residents, because they get there an hour early and wait for the opening. I don't give water to the Benton Harbor Township people. I don't. You know, if they're in line and I know they know I know them, they don't come, because I tell them we're serving the city of Benton Harbor and Benton Harbor only. We want to make them whole, and we're going to do anything that we can do to make sure that they become whole. I'm really, really excited because we do have movement, but I also want to say there's so many things that we need to do, and we need to make sure that they're doing the things that we want done rather than the things that they want done, you see. And it's so huge. Can you imagine? We go door to door. We're the only team, and we don't get paid for this. The day we was out working, would you believe this? We worked almost 12 hours today, passing out water door to door, making sure that every single resident of Benton Harbor have clean water during the process, because the water has been off for 2.5 days. Nobody has water. Even my church was without water. Nobody had water to flush the toilet or do anything, which, you know, I mean, you said a day without water. Can you imagine 2.5 days without water? And it seems like nobody cares. It seems like nobody cares. Nobody. And that's unfortunate, because we have to make sure that we're doing all the things that need to be done to make sure that we get what's need to be done. Because if, like I said, if we had not filed that petition, there's a lot of people we wouldn't be talking today. You know, there's a lot of people that would not be talking to us today. But here's the problem that I face. There's a movement, but why would it take 3 years and a petition? See, the 3 years is nothing to them, but the petition is putting them on notice that we need you to go out here and clean this mess up. And here's another problem that I have with the governor. She put out a statement that due to abundance of caution, don't drink the water. Don't brush your teeth with the water. Don't cook with the water. Don't bathe in the water. And don't make baby formulas with the water. You see, it's always in the language. All she should be saying is that the water is unsafe to drink, unsafe to brush your teeth, unsafe to cook with, unsafe to bathe with, unsafe to make baby formula. The water is unsafe. What's so difficult about saying the water is unsafe? When you're dealing with Black people, it's the words, it's the language. It's the language. We have to practice saying the right thing to my brothers and sisters. You know, I love my brothers and sisters, but we got issues. And it's always in the language. If you try to sugarcoat it, they're going to believe this situation because they believe white folks. I can tell them all day that the water is contaminated and they will still drink it. But if someone like the governor said, do not drink the water because it's unsafe to drink, that would change the whole flavor of everything that's going on around. To me, what is so hard to say this? We have a mayor here All he want to do is take a picture with the governor. He's happy with that. He don't care nothing about the people in the community. He don't care nothing about nothing. All he want to take a picture with the lieutenant governor and the governor. Here's my thing.
Reverend Pickney,
Yes.
how can we support you all? Like, is there a link that we can provide donations in support of the efforts that you all are making in the Benton Harbor area
Oh,
or in
absolutely.
Benton Harbor proper?
Oh, absolutely. You can go to bhbanco.org. That's bhbanco.org.
Okay,
Yeah, and that's where you can donate. It's online, just bhbanco.org. And that's important. We must make sure that we're doing what we need to do. And also, I would love to have a team from Detroit to come down there and help us pass out water, you see, because we don't get no additional help like another location, because we're a Black organization, and we care about our community. That's why we go door to door. Nobody else goes door to door, and we had the opportunity to do the whole city, which is a huge thing and a lot of work.
that's awesome. Okay, so we will, there are a couple of questions for you, and we're going to address questions at the end of the webinar. So stick around and we'll have some questions for you.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
I do get a little excited because I could have went on for hours. So I'm glad you stopped me, because nothing can stop me when I'm on a roll like that. But thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for joining us and for informing us of what's happening in Benton Harbor. I know we've all seen Benton Harbor in the news recently, and so we want to be able to support you all however we can. So let me pull up the slideshow again, and we are going to move on to Dr. Sarah Hughes. Dr. Sarah Hughes is an assistant professor in the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. Her research focuses on water and climate policy, including the production of safe and affordable drinking water in resilient cities. A native Michigander, she received her PhD in 2011 from the University of California, Santa Barbara. And she is going to be discussing her research on emergency management and water systems in the city of Detroit with us today. Without further ado, I welcome Dr. Sarah Hughes.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction and certainly for the invitation. It's a real honor to be part of this panel and to be sharing virtual space with everyone this evening. So thank you so much. And what a thing to be following such incredible talks and testimony. So I'm happy to be able to share, as Tiana said, some of the research we've been doing in the hopes that it might help support and inform the important work that you all are doing. And I'm going to see if I can pull up a couple of slides. I wouldn't be a good professor if I didn't make a PowerPoint. I apologize, just a second. Great. And so the work I'm going to be sharing today is absolutely the direct result of conversations that I had with Ms. Claire Mcclendon in Flint and with Ms. Monica Lewis Patrick in Detroit, going on 2 or 3 years ago at this point. When we were first starting this research, we were trying to see what we could contribute to understanding why the Flint water crisis happened and was continuing on what we could learn and support from those events as researchers, where we could kind of fit in and help. And one thing I heard in those conversations really clearly was the sense that emergency management had really played a big role in the events that had unfolded, both in Flint and Detroit. And so that was one of the calls we kind of took up from those conversations to say, okay, well, what could we, how could we help unpack and provide evidence for the role that emergency management did play in these cities. And it's really exciting to finally have our findings out in the world and to be able to share them with you quite officially at this point. So as I said, we were really motivated at the time by the events unfolding in the city of Flint. I have, I grew up in and around Flint. My family are longtime Flint residents. And so I was eager to see how I could now as an academic contribute to some of the discussions. And so what we decided to do to better understand and again, kind of provide as much rigorous evidence as possible was to ask two questions about emergency management. So first, in the application of Michigan's emergency manager law, is there evidence of bias, right? And so I think that as we've already heard this evening, this is maybe only an open question for some folks. But we wanted to see if there was a way we could provide even more evidence of bias in the application of emergency management in which cities the state chooses to take over and which they don't. And second, if we could find evidence of the effects of these takeovers, specifically on cities' drinking water systems. So once a city has been taken over by the state, what effects were we seeing for these communities' water systems? Now, again, I think going into the project, I think it was important for us to recognize that the state plays and can play in across the US a really important role in helping to ensure the fiscal viability of its cities and its communities. So it's not as though the state doesn't have a role to play in supporting its cities, but it was pretty clear that Michigan's particular approach to the problem was not working, and we wanted to see how we could unpack that. So on the first question, this question of how well does a city's financial position predict its likelihood of being taken over? Or put another way, is there really clear evidence that the state only takes over the most financially stressed cities? Or is there something else going on? As Ms. Mcclendon was alluding to or told us earlier, there's a sense and previous evidence that we're building on that it's not only financial distress that leads the state to take over these cities. And so this is a complicated table. We've got a lot of numbers going on here, but the takeaway, the sort of short answer to the question is that we did not find evidence that it was purely a city's financial position that led to emergency manager takeovers. That if we looked at the types of financial criteria the state's been using to initiate a takeover, it is just not a good predictor of the cities that the state chooses to intervene in. We also, in addition to the city's financial position, we also collected data on their reliance on state revenue, the cities, how much a state relies on state transfers, the percent of African-American residents in the city, and the median household income. And a lot like Ms. Mcclendon was saying earlier, we found that these were equally good, if not better, predictors of the state taking over the community. So meaning that if a city is highly reliant on state resources, if it has a high percentage of African American residents, if it has low median household income, that's almost as good of a predictor of state takeover as the city's financial stress. So a big takeaway for us is that while, the letter of the law, we're talking about PA 436, is meant to convey this kind of rational approach to, supporting and preventing bankruptcy and intervening during times of financial stress. We just don't find evidence of that when we look at the numbers. Another point I wanted to highlight is we also found that states or cities that had been taken over subsequently lost more state revenue than cities that hadn't been taken over. So here we have our supposedly most financially stressed cities in our state, and those are the cities that the state is pulling money back from, while they might simultaneously be giving more money to other communities. So it's not as though it was an across the board pullback, but we saw that those cities in particular were also not only being subjected to budget cuts and other austerity measures under the emergency managers, but we're also seeing their state revenue shares decline as well. On the second front, or on the second question of what happens once emergency management is initiated. So I feel confident saying at this point that we've found more additional evidence. We're certainly building on previous knowledge here. We found additional evidence that certain communities are targeted for state takeover. And so then the second question is, what's the consequence of that for these communities? And again, I don't think that our findings or our conclusions are much of a surprise to anybody on this platform. But again, hoping that continuing to provide this evidence in new ways and in public ways will inform the conversation. But we found that cities that have come under emergency management, we found in most cases, the cities had changes made to their drinking water systems, usually in the form of sharp increases in their water rates, the initiation of water shutoffs. Of course, in the case of Detroit, this was a key strategy in the city's reorganization and asset consolidation ahead of the bankruptcy proceedings to increase the financial position of the drinking water system. But this was a common experience for emergency manager cities, and also efforts to privatize, sometimes often successfully, to privatize drinking water assets as well. And so what we did is we compared those experiences to cities that had been under similar financial distress. So you could perhaps argue, well, this is just the consequence of a city facing a tight budget, having financial distress. It's not a function of the emergency manager. So to kind of combat that argument, we compared these emergency manager cities to the experiences of similarly financially distressed cities that hadn't come under emergency management. And we didn't find any evidence of similar outcomes for the drinking water systems. We didn't find evidence of sharp increases in their rates or the initiation of shutoffs or efforts to privatize the water system. So again, I feel confident saying that that's a unique experience of emergency manager cities. And I know, again, this is not news for folks, but again, hoping we can provide more evidence that's useful for this. The last point I wanted to make here is that that there are better ways, that as I alluded to at the beginning, every state has some way of addressing and helping cities when they face financial stress. This happens all over the place, happens all the time. Cities get into financial trouble, and that's a role that the state plays, is to kind of be that backstop. But we know that there are better ways to go about it. Michigan's approach, both on the response to financial distress and in terms of how the state allows cities to generate and use revenue, is at one end of a spectrum. It's at a really restrictive, heavy-handed end of a spectrum. And there are many, many other examples from other states, solutions that have been proposed that can help address this problem of financial distress in cities in ways that preserve public services, maintain local voice, and leave cities in a stronger financial position than before the crisis, or before their financial crisis. And so I really hope that this and these broader conversations can encourage the state to finally take another look at PA 436, at the way the state regulates municipal finances, the way they intervene and support cities when they are facing financially difficult times. And just thank you again for the opportunity to share our work and to be part of the conversation. I've learned so much tonight, and I've just really appreciated listening to these presentations.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. We appreciate you in sharing your work, but also in doing the work to help to kind of enlighten others outside of our community of what we already know and help us to push this work forward. So thank you. I will go back to sharing, and next I want to introduce We the People of Detroit's very own President and CEO, Monica Lewis-Patrick. She's an educator, entrepreneur, and human rights activist. Along with the other 4 founders of We the People of Detroit, she, with the leadership of volunteers and community experts, placed herself and We the People of Detroit at the forefront of the water justice struggle in Michigan, across the country, and globally. Monica is known throughout the environmental justice as the water warrior. She is actively engaged in the struggle for access to safe, affordable water for all under-resourced communities. And with that, I will hand it over to Monica.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been an incredible evening as we start to close out this 5th annual Imagine a Day Without Water. And as you've heard, we don't have to imagine in Michigan. We're so grateful for the highlights that Mama Claire provided. And as you can see, Flint's not waiting on anyone to come rescue them. They're leading as it relates to water affordability policies. They are moving those policies forward. And anyone that can support that activity, we're asking you to support the work in Flint to actually codify the human right to water by making sure water is clean, safe, and affordable. Hats off and salute once again to Tony the Tiger. We can't say enough about Tony, his leadership, his bold leadership, his willingness to help us connect the dots, not leaving PFOS in isolation, but connecting what's happening in rural communities. Because what we know, if we're not very careful in Michigan, they will pit rural and urban communities against each other. And we know that all of us are struggling to access this life-sustaining force. And then the other thing that I think is going to be important for folks to just pay attention to, Tony was able to not only lift up water affordability, but he was able to sound the alarm that it's not just unaffordable water, it's not just lead, but many of our communities are also battling PFOS as well. It's another issue that we can unite our fight around. Hats off and salute to the great Reverend Pinckney. He once again, like Mama Claire, Mcclendon, they have been the canaries in the mine. If you go back and connect the dots, and so eloquently they did, they were on the fight against emergency management. They were fighting this austerity and this tyranny. They were connecting the dots of the fight for a fair wage to what was happening around emergency management and the stealing of union contracts and pension funds and carving up those decisions and setting aside democracy. So these things, as Reverend Pinckney tells us often, it's not one thing, but it's everything. And then we just really want to appreciate Dr. Sarah Hughes. And Dr. Hughes was exactly correct. She came to us a couple of years ago looking for that common thread. What was the causation for these conditions of inequity, injustice? And we had told her back then, years and years ago, that we knew that emergency management was unjust and anti-democratic, that it was anti-people, anti-workers, that it was anti-American. But little did we know that our life-sustaining force of water, sitting on 1/5 of the world's fresh water, sitting in these Great Lakes, that we would be in a situation where we could not afford our water. We could not trust our water, that our water would be contaminated with everything from PFAS to lead to other toxins. But on this day, imagine a day without one strong stones. And thank God for Angie and Miss Sheila and all the work that's been done at Burston Fieldhouse. We want to lift up the fact that it's only because of this kind of down in the trenches work that you've seen from these exceptional leaders, everyday folks that just get up determined that they will not allow on their watch water to continue to be unclean, unsafe, and unaffordable. So we want to make sure that on this annual event, that there will never, ever be a time where we don't acknowledge the conditions in our community, because some people make it a one-day activity. And what we know from all across the state of Michigan, many of us are living this every day. Harm, injustice, inequity. But what you also heard today, and I hope you'll be inspired by, you have action steps. You have plans that have been set forth that you can be a part of. So please, as we stated, make sure you're supporting the work in Flint. Make sure that you're spreading the news about PFAS and what's happening with in Oscoda and all across Michigan. Lift up and donate and support and spread the news about Benton Harbor. Benton Harbor is not new news, it's old news. And it was the people of Benton Harbor that deputized themselves to lift their own stories, to get filters on those sinks, to make sure that people knew that if they needed water, there was a place to get water. And then on behalf of our young people, I can't talk enough about the work that is happening, that is being seeded not only with youth, we the youth of Detroit, but youth all across the Great Lakes. And so over the summer, we had the opportunity to meet with some of those great leaders from Toledo and Flint and Detroit, and hopefully others will come. But what we've been able to do is through their eyes begin to move from trauma into transformation. And so we saw youth that were afraid to even touch water begin to walk in the water. We saw youth talking about ways to take water recreation and make it a way to talk about these inequities and injustices. As you saw from Brooke's art, she's taking her artistic abilities and talking about these social justice inequities. And so it is through our babies that we believe that they will help us unite our fight for the human right to water. It's just been an honor and privilege to be with you. I hope that you will receive all the resources that are in the chat. We want you to make sure that you take the pledge to support water affordability. And please make sure that you support all of our speakers and all of the organizations that have been lifted today. And we'll leave you in the words of the greatest mayor in the history of the city of Detroit, the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young. He said, if you find a good fight, get in it. We believe that the human right to water is a fight worth getting in, and not only a fight worth getting in, it's a fight worth staying in. It's our water. So if you all join me in the chant, whose water?
Our water.
Water.
Whose water?
Our water.
It's our water.
It's our water. We want to get to a point where we don't have to imagine a day without water. We want everyone to have clean, safe, and affordable water. Thank you so much for having us this evening, and I'll turn it back over to Tiana to close us out.
Our water.
Thank
It's
you.
our water. Yeah.
I love that. Thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
Monica. That was awesome. As always, you are a fantastic leader and closer. Thank you for your work in this space as well. We do have a couple of questions and we are running early. So I want to give an opportunity to answer a question. There was a couple for Miss Claire. Is Flint taking any water from Karingandi pipeline? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing
Karingandi.
Karingandi pipeline today.
The city of Flint is not taking water from the KWA. Those of you may know that the Karingandi Water Authority was the drive to build this new pipeline called the Karingandi is what triggered the water crisis, because while they were building that pipeline, they decided to switch to Flint. So you had Karingandi there to make money, and you had this Flint water to save money, and we got poisoned in the process. But no, the city of Flint is not receiving water from Karingandi. We are back on the GLEWA, what is now called GLEWA system, but the outlying counties are all on the new pipeline, all of the surrounding areas. The KWA is being used as a backup to the Flint water system. Although we are still on the hook for a major percent of the bonds to pay for that pipeline. And again, we have to ask ourselves when we're confronted with these issues, who benefits? Who benefits? And in Flint, we know that it's JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Stidale Financial, and 60 cents out of $1 that we pay on our bills go to these nameless, faceless stakeholders.
So to that point, the next question was, why not reject the 60 cents per dollar paying for the unneeded and unaffordable pipeline?
Well, before the pipeline was even built and before we knew the cost and all that kind of stuff, we did, while we were fighting for clean water, we were trying to resist the switch to the KWA. We were told that Detroit was gouging us for water prices. You know, we originally received our water from Detroit. We were told that we would be saving money and all this kind of stuff. So that is that's a fight down the road to figure out how we can decouple ourselves, how we can break that relationship with these bondholders. But right now, our fight is we're having an intervention with our water rates, fighting for affordability, no shutoffs that should be permanent. If you could do it during COVID, you can do it now. So we are looking at this like it's time for residents to be the ones who are benefiting and moving forward and taking this unfortunate experience and turning it into a positive for the future.
Monica, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to build on what Mama Claire just so eloquently shared. I put an article in the chat, and it basically is the water banker barons. And what it lays out is that many of the banks that were protected during the bankruptcy and the contrived bankruptcy in the city of Detroit, and many of those same banks that were a part of the funding scheme for the Karingandi Water Authority pipeline, those are the same actors that are buying up the aquifers around the globe. So these things are not happening in isolation, they're happening in coordination. And so we have to keep lifting those connective tissues. When you look at the fact that the Pboss family is a major investor not only in the privatization of public education, but the privatization of water, public water. Those things are not separate in Michigan. So many of our communities that saw this austerity play out around water systems being restructured, having this austerity and tyranny imposed on us under the belief that somehow it was fixing our finances. The truth is, the federal government has divested from water over the last 50 years. They, at one point, were spending our tax dollars, they were contributing about 67 to 69% of those dollars went into maintaining water infrastructure because everybody understood it was a critical part of maintaining good public health. Now your federal government only contributes a dismal 7 to 9% toward water infrastructure. So what they have done, they've restructured the entire funding of it to make it about individual ratepayers. And we know that working class and poor people will never make enough money to be able to pay rates in Detroit have gone up 438% in the last 2 decades. Our wages have not kept pace with that. So it has to be a restructuring of how we're funding good public health in these United States. When you're spending money on war, and we know right now, we need about $6 trillion to truly fund an equitable upgrade of our water infrastructure. The Congress has only committed 1.74 to that upgrade. So that should tell all of us, they've already decided where the sacrifice zones are. We have to commit to an equitable and just way forward for all of us. We leave no one behind in the EJ framework, no one.
Thank you, Monica. I want to make sure, Ms. Claire, that before we leave, can you let us know where we can go to support you and participate in the petition that you have?
You can go to Flint H2O Justice Facebook page, Flint H2O Justice.
Okay. I will include that in the meeting notes. We had another question for Reverend Pinckney. How much money still needs to be raised to complete the lead line removal?
That's a real good question because right now, I think we have 18 million and it's going to take a little bit over 30 million to complete the project. The thing is, the governor announced that it would take 18, she could do it in 18 months. I'm satisfied with that, but it also could be done between 6 and 12 months. So I would love to see it done during that period of time because in Newark, New Jersey, they had 20,000 lead lines and it was completed in less than 2 years. Benton Harbor only has 6,000 lead lines. And I believe it could be done in 6 months, 6 to 9 months. I believe that. And right now, we're in a position to get a lot of money from a lot of different people. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to do what needs to be done to get that money. We can't depend on the city of Benton Harbor. You know, we can't depend on them to do what is right. We got to make sure that we're doing everything that's right to make sure. I would say we're probably short, I would say from 12 to 15 million.
Okay. Thank you. And then another question is the Eagle and EPA conducting testing for the filters?
The EPA is conducting a test now for the filters. One of the things, matter of fact, we had an update today on the filters. They went through about 25 minutes of saying something that wasn't nothing. And we believe that at this time, we're not going to use the filter until maybe after the pipes has been changed to make sure that they're working correctly or something like that. But I believe it's going to take at least 120 days for the study to be complete or longer.
Thank you. I think that is all of the questions that we have, and we are 2 minutes past our closing time. So thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you all not only for showing up here today and for this Imagine a Day Without Water program, but also just for the work that you all continue to do in the community and just kind of carrying this burden for us and making sure that we are all moving toward a place where everybody has equitable resources across the board. Thank you everyone who showed up to participate and to hear from our speakers. Please be on the lookout for more events, and we will also send a follow-up that includes this video as well as the resources that we discussed today.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.